The best person to bring in to talk about it, longtime political analyst at KDK Television, my friend Jon Delano, nice enough to step out of retirement to join me tonight. Jon, great to have you here. Before we focus on this mayor's race, something you taught me a long time ago, these other races, such as for school board and judges, are very important. So talk about the importance of those before we focus on the mayor's race. Good evening.
Well, thank you, Rob. Always great to be with you and all your wonderful listeners. Yes, these municipal and county elections are really much more critical in many ways to our daily lives than the election of state officials or even national figures that we do in the even years. We're in the odd year, 2025. We are, we are electing the people who raise our taxes, the people who provide our services. Elections really are determinative of the kinds of quality of government we get at the local level. And that also includes school boards and the kinds of education that we provide our teachers. So nothing is more important, I think, than voting in these so-called off-year elections and electing good people as mayors and council members and school directors, and even as judges, because judges could impact our lives if we get in trouble or if we sue somebody. You want good quality judges. We're electing 8 new judges in Allegheny County. Tomorrow will be the primary election for that. So these elections are very important. The other thing I would add, Rob, is that because so many of our municipalities are basically one-party rule, the primaries are more important in many ways than the general election, because the winners tomorrow are likely to go on and win in November, depending on whether they come from majority Republican communities or majority Democratic communities.
So let me ask you, and I'm going to talk later tonight to former state representative Jim Christiana. Republicans have made noise in the Commonwealth, and some have to really wonder, has enough noise been made in Washington that it could affect the upcoming gubernatorial race? Do you think there will ever be, anything's possible, but maybe a Republican, and not to say that Mr. Marino, Mr. West aren't strong candidates, but do you ever think there'll be a legitimate Republican who could actually challenge for the mayor's seat in Pittsburgh?
Well, I do, and I think that, of course, depends on who the Democratic candidate is. Is it an incumbent who's really unpopular, who happens to win in the party because his party backs him, but who may not be popular as a whole? Remember, the people who vote in the primaries tend to be a very small number. In some primaries, we have in the teens, 16, 17, 18%. I think the prediction for tomorrow in Pittsburgh could be as high as 30%, but that means that 2/3 of the voters aren't voting in the Democratic primary. Well, they're more likely to vote in November than they are in the spring, which is why Republicans always have high hopes that they can win in November. And, we'll see. I think it's possible. I don't know that it's going to happen this year. We shall see.
Open primaries a part of our future, do you think?
I do. I think we're getting there. We've seen one bill pass the state Senate already that would have allowed independent voters, that is, those not registered with a party, to pick a party to vote in the primary. So if you're registered with no party, an independent, you could choose whether to vote in the Republican primary or the Democratic primary. That bill passed the state Senate. It has not yet passed the state House. It actually has to go back through both houses in order to become law now because we're in a different legislative session. But the bottom line is that we're getting more and more independent voters, people who don't want to be associated with either the Republican or the Democratic parties. And those people now are the real swing voters. In Pennsylvania alone, Rob, there are over 1 million of these people. And they can determine who's governor, who's senator, who wins office. And I think both parties are beginning to see that if we let them vote in our primaries, that'll help us pick candidates who can win them over in November. smart strategy. We ought to have open primaries. It's time.
All right, now it's time for me to talk the real reason you're here, this mayor's race. Now, Corey jumps in right away. A lot of people leaning in his direction. Obviously, first family of politics. We know about his father, his history, his legend. Corey now the controller of Allegheny County, one-time councilman in Pittsburgh. And let's face it, Mayor Gainey, very tough act to follow that pandemic. I don't know how they've kept the lights on, but they have. And now in recent days, I'm hearing that Mr. Gainey is starting to gain a little ground. How do you see this thing unfolding, some of the major issues? And, I'm going to maybe ask you to give me a prediction, too. So all of the above, a trifecta of a question. Go right ahead.
Well, you might get 2 out of 3. Let's see. The bottom line is that whenever you have an incumbent running, the performance of the incumbent in office is always an issue. It's a referendum on whether voters think Ed Gainey has done a good job as mayor of Pittsburgh. That's the beginning stepping stone. And what incumbents do, particularly if they're not sure that they've convinced the majority of people that they've done a good job, is to go after their opponent and to make their opponent seem as if he is totally unqualified to serve in office. And we've seen the Gainey campaign do, I think, a pretty effective job at trashing Corey O'Connor. Now, they basically have tried to turn this into a national race where it's Ed Gainey who will stand up to Donald Trump. It's Ed Gainey who will defend the rights of Pittsburghers against a federal government and who will represent them and will fight for them. And at the same time, he's tried to label Corey O'Connor as a MAGA Republican with support from the Trump side and from developers and from horrible human beings. Now, as a campaign strategist, as a tactic, that can be very effective. And so the question is whether people buy it or whether people think that Ed Gainey himself has not done a good job, and therefore it's time for someone different like Corey O'Connor. Can Corey O'Connor can he do things better with respect to crime and housing and economic development and the rest? So there are a lot of unanswered questions out there. I can see a path for both candidates to win the nomination, to be absolutely honest. I think this could be a landslide for one candidate or the other. It could be a very close election. It really all comes down on the kind of Democrat that comes out to vote and in what part of the city comes out to vote. Because we have a rough idea where Gainey's votes are. We have a rough idea where O'Connor's votes are. And then we have certain areas like the 14th Ward, the Squirrel Hill, Greenfield, Highland Park, Shady Side, Point Breeze. These communities can go either way, and nobody really knows.
All right, so I got to ask you in closing, Jon Delano, longtime political analyst, now retired KDK television. Lenny McAllister, who will be with me tomorrow night from 8 to 10. Earlier heard a sound clip during the newscast. They were talking about Democratic candidates for the presidency in the next election, and obviously our governor's name comes up. But he's got to get reelected as governor, first thing on his mind. Do you think there's a legitimate chance a Republican could challenge him for the governor's race in Pennsylvania, and who might it be? Some ideas on possible candidates.
Well, I do think absolutely that there will be a Republican running against Josh Shapiro. And given what happened in 24 with Donald Trump winning the state by 127,000 votes, I think it's quite possible for a Republican to beat Josh Shapiro. I think it'll be tough because I think Shapiro has been an effective incumbent and he knows how to use the powers of incumbency. State Treasurer Stacey Garrity is already out there. And she is somebody who ran up a huge number of votes in winning re-election in 2024. And I think there's every indication she is running for governor, and she will be a strong candidate. Now, whether she's the only candidate or not, I think remains to be seen. Republicans have a way often of uniting behind one person and really going into battle with that one candidate. We're still a number of months away from that happening. We're going to hear more about this, I think, come next fall. But I don't think Josh Shapiro will be challenged in the Democratic Party. I think he's very strong in the Democratic Party. But I do think there'll be a Republican who will give him a battle. And, of course, and this time you'll have Donald Trump, who carried the state supporting the Republican candidate for governor. And just as I believe he helped Dave McCormick defeat Bob Casey in the U.S. Senate race, President Trump can do the same on the Republican side. Pennsylvania is always going to be a battleground state. I don't care what office you're running for. There's no done deals. Every candidate has to run, and they have to really demonstrate, particularly if they're an incumbent, whether it's the mayor of Pittsburgh or the governor of Pennsylvania, they have to demonstrate that they deserve to be reelected.
KDK Television longtime political analyst, now retired, Jon Delano. Now, you know, tomorrow night, if you need the juice, you need the action, you're more than welcome to call in, okay?
Well, I have to tell you, my friends over on the TV side have asked me to come back.
Smart.
So I'll probably be over there. But, you know, for you, Rob, I can always find 5 minutes. So well, let's see what it brings. You got my number. You know how to reach me.
You're the best, sir. Have a great night.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.
That's what you call a legend in this business, Jon Delano.